Ruth chapter 4.
Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said,
"Turn aside, friend, sit down here."
And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said,
"Sit down here."
So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer,
"Naomi, who had come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not tell me, that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it, and I come after you."
And he said,
"I will redeem it."
Then Boaz said,
"That the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you will also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance."
Then the Redeemer said,
"I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it."
Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz,
"Buy it for yourself,"
he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people,
"You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and that belonged to Chilion and the Malin, also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Malin. I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. The name of the dead may not be cut off among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are my witness this day."
Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said,
"We are the witness. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephratah, and be renowned in Bethlehem, and make your house like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman."
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went in to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi,
"Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him."
Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the woman of the neighborhood gave him a saying,
"A son has been born to Naomi."
They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Solomon. Solomon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David.
Welcome back to the 4th McGregor Podcast Special on the Book of Ruth. Again, I'm joined by Pastor Mark and Pastor Russell. My name's Chloe Weimer, and I am the host of Talk Truth Podcast. I've just enjoyed this process of going through this book, and I also want to shout out the kids that just read the entire Book of Ruth and did it so well.
Mm-hmm. You know, there was the occasional interesting pronunciation introduced, and I'll give that. But there is absolutely no. First, I wouldn't even agree to try that at that age. Yeah. To put it out there, and then to pull it off that well, not a chance.
Great job.
Way to go, young kiddos.
Yeah.
Good job.
And it made us just sound a lot more interesting, because if it was just us talking, I don't know, it just doesn't have the same effect, you know?
Nah, and it automatically
Let's get some parents watching.
Oh yeah, we know their parents are on this
Hopefully
episode.
they'll keep watching.
Absolutely, unless they've clicked off by now and said, "Well, the good part's over, the kids are done." Yeah, that could
And
be
grandparents and aunts and uncles.
Yeah, the network spread.
It's a great way.
So, Pastor Mark, why don't you start us off with a little rehashing of everything that's happened thus far?
Our story so far.
Yes. There was a famine in the land. Yes, there was a famine in the land.
Imagine a world. Okay, we're going too far. I'll stop.
And this is in the time of the judges, and we have a famine. And Elimelech and his family Elimelech decides to take his family out of the promised land there and head on over to Moab, thinking that, hey, we can get some food here. It's that tough. I'm willing to leave the land that God has promised to go. And we talked about the irony of leaving Bethlehem, house of bread, to go and try to find bread somewhere else. So they go to Moab. Well, unfortunately, Elimelech dies. His two sons that are with them get married, but they also end up dying. And so now it's just Elimelech's wife, Naomi, and her two daughters-in-law. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Daughters-in-law. Yeah, daughters-in-law. And all of a sudden, she gets news that there is food in the land again, and they go back. But it's been, 13, 14?
It's been a lot of time, years.
Years that they've been there in Moab. So she decides to go back. Well, the two daughters-in-law decide they want to go too. And she says, no, you stay here. You have no need to go back. I'm okay. You stay here. Well, one of them does turn back. Orpah turns back. But Ruth says, nope, I'm going to go with you. And that's basically chapter 1. Chapter 2, we find that Ruth has gone to work to try to get some money for these two widows, both Naomi and herself. And so she's working, and that's when we're introduced to Boaz. She ends up working in one of ends up working in one of Boaz's fields. Obviously not a coincidence, but by God's providence, Boaz takes notice of Ruth and begins to take care of Ruth in some somewhat subtle ways, but there's a little bit of a relationship that begins to happen there.
In our last episode, I described it as flirtatious. Biblical flirtation. And I stand by that terminology.
Coming to a Russell Howard commentary near you.
Yep, that's right.
He put the word flirt and biblical together, and then I said, let's just bring them all together. Yes. Okay. So we have that, and now all of a sudden in chapter 3, Naomi hashes this grand plan to get Naomi a little closer to Boaz, because, hey, wait a minute, if there's something going here, I'm not getting any younger, you're not getting any younger, let's get this thing going.
There is a moment to be seized.
There is a moment to be seized, and she was very specific on that moment, gave Ruth very specific plans on what she needed to do. Ruth said, I'll do it, and she obeyed, but she actually did a little bit more, because ultimately we see there on the threshing floor in the middle of the night, this encounter with Boaz, and Ruth essentially proposes to Boaz. And Boaz, being a man of character, says, I will, but there is one that is nearer a redeemer than I am. I would love to be that redeemer, but there is one nearer than I am. And that's basically where we end up at the end of chapter 3, right? That's where we left off. Did I leave any important details out?
No, that was awesome.
Well done. Yep.
And so we pick up chapter 4, and we have Boaz not waiting at all to get things rolling here. And so it left off, and Naomi had the idea that Boaz is probably going to take care of this pretty quick. She told Ruth, don't worry, I have a feeling Boaz is going to take care of this. Well, the very next morning, he's down there at the gate where business takes place. And just so happens that this near kinsman redeemer is just walking by.
So that's somebody with a higher ranking claim, and nothing in the Book of Ruth tells us exactly how all these people are related. Right. But whoever this guy is, he's got a higher claim to the role of kinsman redeemer
than Boaz
does.
Right.
So Boaz is right to say, I can't make the move
legally.
Yeah. He and Ruth have kind of sort of agreed in chapter 3 that they want to be together, but he can't make the move until this other redeemer has his option.
Yeah. And just as interesting as we saw with Ruth ending up in one of Boaz's fields, here we have this guy
so true.
Just walking by, And Boaz spots him and says, "Hey, you, come over here, sit down." And the guy obeys and comes over and sits down.
Hey, you elders, I'm going to need witnesses for what's about to happen. Y'all sit down too.
That also kind of tells you just how crazy the time of the judges was, that there was just no system at all. People are just kind of chilling by the town gate, and like,
that was the system.
Get everybody together. There's about to be a meeting of some consequence
like,
here.
who does that?
Yeah.
And Boaz must have been a man of influence, because he kind of takes charge here. He tells this guy to sit down. He does.
Yeah.
And he gets these 10 other elders to come over and sit down. So must be a man of influence, of somewhat of...
They don't dismiss him.
No, not at all. There's like, this is the way it's done. And, the system might seem odd to us, but it was how they did things.
Must have been the system.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where we are, where Boaz is called a court, let's call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he then presents the challenge to the nearer kinsman redeemer to say, hey, here's the situation. Are you willing to be the redeemer for Ruth and Naomi?
Yeah, and because that was the law. Like, he was being obedient.
Right. And here's the land and all this.
Yeah, and the statement is Naomi is selling off. She's selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So is it? Do I read that right? Mm-hmm. That it's okay. You better act now, because in a way that would be really, really, the very situation the kinsman redeemer law is supposed to keep from happening is about to happen. She's about to have to start selling off pieces of this land just to live. So if you're going to move, it's now.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
That's the way I read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And initially his response is, yeah, I'm in.
It's an unencumbered real estate deal.
I get even if I have to, to take care of a couple of people, at least I'm getting income off the land.
Sure.
So it sounded good until what?
By the way, if you get in on the land part of this, there is a young lady involved.
Yes.
So you'd have to take her as part of the deal. And you try to get inside of the state of Boaz's head at that moment, and you wonder if he's just kind of, don't do it, because obviously he wants his shot.
Yeah.
Well, the whole love story aspect kind of seems like when you're reading it and this guy goes, yeah, I'll do it. You're like, oh, no,
that's not how this is supposed to be.
Boaz.
Yeah.
But Boaz wasn't finished yet.
No, he wasn't.
He hadn't told the whole story.
No, what I love too is that Boaz was worried about, first of all, the name of the Lord, so much so that he would be obedient no matter how much he was interested in Ruth. And then second, that he was interested in just others, like, this is the other guy's land legally. He should have the shot at it before I do. And so that's so reflective of how God wants us to be concerned about his name first. And that naturally is just going to pour over into others. And so I think I agree with you. Like, you wonder what was going on in Boaz's mind. Like, was he like just tense and wondering what he was going to say and everything? But at the same time, I feel like he immediately knew what he was going to say when Ruth approached him in the first place. So
he's extremely intentional through the whole thing. Resolute and intentional, but at the same time interested in following the law as God has prescribed it.
Definitely.
Which is a great balance.
Why do you think the person was not named, this nearer kinsman redeemer?
Like, he kind of bails on his obligation in a way that works out great for Ruth and Boaz.
Right.
But in terms of how does his character stack up? Well, his character stacks up as, I'm greedy for the land, but I am not interested in taking on the obligation of a Moabite widow.
Yeah.
So his, I think it's almost, if we had his name, he would be listed by name in the hall of people in the Bible who behave like schmucks.
Hall of shame.
Yeah, he'd be in the hall of shame. And this way he gets to kind of have the dignity of having obscurity.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, we don't have a name to put it in the hall of shame.
Yeah, and with that too, a little bit before this episode, Pastor Howard and I were kind of talking about, we live in such an age of prosperity gospel, and the opposite. Once you realize how bad prosperity gospel is, then you like me, I have gone through this before where I feel like anything that I do that is good won't necessarily produce fruit, but that's not necessarily true either.
Yeah, you and I, and all of us would agree that the prosperity gospel, this notion that everything in life can be driven by my boldly asserted faith words that cause the universe and God to align itself for my version of my well-being. That's the heart of the prosperity gospel. And we're so correctly intense to not be misunderstood to believe that we might sometimes tend to fail to acknowledge that God does bless obedience.
Yeah.
That there is a law of the harvest. It's not super predictable, and you're not suddenly sovereign over your universe by the power of your words of faith. That's hogwash. But God blesses obedience. And here we see that the obedient, consistent, faithful behavior of these two young people, Boaz and Ruth, ends up being blessed by God.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
We see at the end of that conversation between the near kinsman redeemer and Boaz that he says, okay, you take the near kinsman redeemer says, take the right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. And then we get this interesting custom that happens after that, where he then gives his sandals apparently to Boaz as a...
Well, only one of them. That's
only
the
one
worst
of them.
part.
Yeah.
What do you go? He limped home.
Yeah. So what's the deal with sandals?
It's funny because in another passage, if in Deuteronomy 25, and I had remembered reading this, but Chloe helped me spot just where it was because she's got her computer with me and I don't. If the law of the kinsman redeemer broke down completely, if you went through all the eligible kinsman redeemers and none of them was, I ain't marrying her. Eventually, the young woman who, and I keep saying young, but the woman who was rejected by the entire potential pool of kinsman redeemers, obviously that's pretty shamed. She's feeling very shamed. She has the right to convene the elders of the city and look at the kinsman redeemer in front of all the elders of the city and take his shoe and throw it at him and spit in his face. And if you think that's just too weird, it's in Deuteronomy 25. And while I paraphrased it, I didn't get it wrong. So there's a lot of shoe law going on here.
Yeah.
And we were joking, it's sandals. At the urging of some young friends of mine who knew the type of sandal that I like most. I like sandals that go over the top of your foot, not ones that go between your toes. Between your toes hurts. I grew up at the beach.
My wife is like that. She doesn't like them between. Yeah.
I grew up at the beach wearing flip-flops and stuff like that, but I don't like anything between my toes. So I teach high schoolers, and my high school students last spring said, well, if you like sandals that go over your foot, you've got to get a pair of. And if Birkenstock, if you want to sponsor this podcast, we will take the check. I had to get a pair of Birkenstocks because they were right, and they are marvelous. They are incredible.
Your favorite shoe now?
I don't spend a ton of money on shoes. They are, I think, the most expensive pair of shoes I own are my Birkenstocks. So the idea of, if we're going to do a real estate deal here, the real estate deal here, the sandals are in play. It makes perfect sense to me. So.
Well, at this time, too, people probably just really valued their shoes.
Yeah,
like more than people do today. We have so many shoes now.
You almost said I have so many shoes.
I know,
now.
But I didn't want to be the only one.
Well, that prompts a slightly gender stereotyping response from me. Like, sure, you have a lot of shoes, Chloe, but
I don't know. I keep my shoes in a laundry basket, and I feel like one laundry basket's worth of shoes. Isn't that bad? That
is not bad.
Not bad.
If you think that, what is the number of shoes that's like appropriate? Comment below whatever number of shoes you think you own, if it's appropriate or inappropriate.
I am not sure that every pair of shoes that are arranged in an orderly fashion on my closet floor, if I gathered them all up, they might overflow a typical laundry basket.
Really?
I may have you beaten on shoes. Including my sandals.
I may too.
Yeah. Wow, we have gone way down the sandal rabbit hole. Yeah. Look, the deal is in chapter 4, this other kinsman redeemer who's first in line if he wants it, by God's grace to Boaz and Ruth, he without drama, he steps aside. Without anybody having to be deceitful or weird or behave in an ungodly way, he simply steps aside. And that clears the path for this romance to come to where it needs to come, and for the two of them to be married.
Yep.
And Naomi gets her place of honor in the community, and even gets to help raise her little grandson. And that's a really, really good thing.
Yeah.
But the biggest blessing of all is not just what is obvious, that the girl gets the guy and the guy gets the girl, and Ruth is taken care of, and so is Naomi. But if you look in verse 22, it says, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David.
Wow, it takes the story to a national level at that point.
Yeah, so the little baby that comes out of this union from these two people who have pretty consistently through this story labored to do the right thing and to follow God's law and to live in obedience in a way that honors Christ. The little one that comes of their union is King David's granddaddy.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal, because that puts him, as we did in I think it was at episode 1 that we did the Christmas teaser, the why are we doing this at Christmas time?
Stay tuned till the end.
Yay! Well, here we are. And these are the great grandparents of King David.
King David, yep.
Who is himself the several times great grandfather of Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is kind of remarkable. That this is a part of the Jesus human origin story.
And I think that going back to the prosperity gospel thing, I think that goes to show that your obedience doesn't necessarily always even bless you in the things that are material, though it can, but eternally, with an eternal perspective, that's the bigger thing, is like, how is this going to impact the kingdom of God for eternity? And I guarantee that Ruth in heaven, like, she doesn't care about the fact that she got to have Boaz, the fact that her lineage just led to Christ, that's the way bigger deal. And so, man, if she only knew.
And it's neat to see people outside of Jews being a part of the Messiah.
Yeah.
This is not, and Ruth's not the only one.
No. And not all the women in Jesus' bloodline are quite so, shall we say, well behaved.
Right.
As precious Ruth. There are, there's Rahab, who's never do we see that her behavior gets all that redeemed. She gets to live, but at any rate, you're right, Chloe. I think there's a very sort of meta takeaway from this, that in a universe where God is sovereign and where God loves his people and is always working the tapestry in ways way beyond our ability to see the scale, you just never ever know you cannot gauge the consequentiality. Can that be a word?
Sure.
Okay. You never know how big your blast radius is. You never know what way over there is going to be, or way down the years is going to be affected by your moment in time where you choose a godly course of action, or I would propose an ungodly one. But here we get to see this godly course of action result in such an enormous thing.
Your word tapestry is such a good picture here, because here's this story of just these people and this moment in time. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
No, it's a postage stamp size story.
And then all of a sudden, at the very end, it elevates itself all the way to, David, no, wait, Jesus.
Yeah. And even the whole Old Testament doesn't know. Because the connection to David is a big deal in an Old Testament.
That's what they knew at that time.
Yeah, but the David to Jesus connection we don't get until the genealogies of Christ.
Right.
And
so true.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So that's good.
Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for spending your time with us for these past 4 episodes. If you haven't yet connected with us online, please check us out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and be sure to check out our other McGregor Podcast channels. Just head over to McGregorPodcast.com for all the details. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
This has been a McGregor Podcast Special, hosted and directed by me, Chloe Weimer, Special guests were Pastor Russell Howard and Pastor Mark Bricker. Executive producer and editor Christian Miller. The character readings were read by our narrator, Elora Bays, Naomi, Drea Rose, Ruth, Emma May, Boaz, Jake Hastings, and the elder, Asher Edwards. The set design was Trudy Evans, audio technician, Bill Steinbrecher, social media coordinator, Chloe Weimer, director of McGregor Podcast, Jeff Eskridge. McGregor Podcast is a ministry of McGregor Baptist Church. For more information, head to McGregorPodcast.com. Merry Christmas.